Hello everyone, my name's Alison Yates and I've been doing parchment craft for about 27 years. I thought I would just explain to anybody that's got absolutely no idea what parchment craft is, what if you think you might want to have a little go at it, and just to take you from the very beginning. So first of all, we have parchment. This is what we call parchment. It is a see-through paper. It is translucent. You can see through it, so you can actually if I put my hand behind there, you can see my hand, no problem at all. It is made of wood pulp, as the same normal paper, although of course years ago real parchment was made with animal skins, and the vellums are much finer. They were made with the young animals. But this is what we use, and we use it because it embosses, and we use it because it is translucent. Okay, so when you tear it, you'll find that it has got paper fibres in there. It is a normal paper. Now the normal parchment paper that we use is somewhere between 140 and 160 gram weight. You'll have to buy it from somewhere that sells the parchment paper for parchment craft. You can't go to a normal stationer's and buy it because you'll end up with completely the wrong thing. Sometimes they call parchment paper like a mottled effect type of card or paper, so you can't have that. So you will need to go to a specialist craft shop that does sell things for parchment craft so you can get parchment paper. Okay, so I've switched cameras now, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. First of all, I need to talk about what parchment paper will do. So the properties of parchment is that it embosses. So if you were to grab an embossing tool, and I'll talk about those in a minute, what you do is you press down on the paper onto what we call an embossing mat, and again I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And what it does is it actually turns the paper white. Okay, there's no pen or ink involved. It is just stretching the fibres of the paper, of the parchment paper, and turning them white. What we're actually doing is, by stretching the paper, you introduce air back into this parchment paper, and that's what turns it white. So talking about embossing mats then, I've here got just a quite thick rubber mat. Okay, if you haven't got anything like that, there are again various companies that will do mats for you. There's the Pergamano brand, which has got a good sort of pink silicone mat. There's the Groovy brand, which has got a much more foamy type mat on one side and a hard mat on the other side. You can use things like funky foam, you know what I mean, funky foam. You can buy that at any craft shop, a little bit of foam, anything soft really, or soft-ish. The thing with the rubber is it is a little bit firmer, and so gives the paper a bit more support. Okay, so once you've done that, once you've got something to emboss on, you need something to emboss with. So just talking about now embossing tools, we have various different ranges. There are cheaper ones that you can get, and you can get wooden ones as well. Different ranges, different sizes of a ball tool you could do with. This is a Pergamano one, and you'll know it's Pergamano because it's pink, and it's usually got a little fan somewhere on it, and that's a 3mm ball tool. This is Parchcraft Australia tool here, which are the silver ones with the green, let's see that, can you, the green bands on the end. You may not be able to get those so much now, and these are a bit more of a cheaper range, again with different ball tips on there, but they all do essentially the same thing. They press into the parchment paper and give you that embossing impression. The other thing that you probably will want is a white pencil. It's useful for tracing your image to start with, and it's easily rubbed out once you've finished with it. So you could perhaps, if you are able to draw, you could draw yourself a flower, or of course the advantage really with the parchment paper, as I say, is it's see-through, so you can pop an image underneath. I'm just going to do this little daffodil here, trace it, and then we can emboss it. Now there's lots and lots of different processes to parchment craft. From the initial embossing, there's lace work, there's colouring and all sorts of things. This is just going to deal with the very initial stages and telling you a little bit about where you can get these things from and how you go about it in the very first instance. So I've got two images here. I've got one I've drawn by hand and then one I've traced. And what you normally do is you would turn this parchment over to the back side, and just to make the ball tools rub easier over the parchment paper, I usually just take a tumble dryer sheet and give it a little bit of a rub with that, and that helps the tools to glide over. Now you can emboss then with whichever chosen tool you like. You can do several things. If I just show you on this one here, we're going to emboss the lines. So I'm just pressing in there with a little smallish ball tool, pressing reasonably firmly so that I get the outline of that flower neatly there. You've got to experiment a little bit with your tools to see how hard to press, how lightly to do it, and how many times you're going to need to do it. You don't want to buckle the paper too much. The golden rule with all embossing is to emboss lightly first and then gradually to build up. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just flicking really, and I'm just gently filling in the edge of that petal. Now I didn't necessarily need to do the outline, so what I'm going to do on this one here, you can just about make out, come a bit more central, there we are. I'm going to use the 3mm ball tool first. I'm going to just pick from the outside edge inwards. That's better. I've just zoomed in a little bit more. Right, so I'm going to do another petal here. So I've just going to go from the outside edge, pressing medium on my harder rubber mat here. If you're on a softer mat, you'll probably find you don't need to press quite so much. So just, again, experiment a little bit. I'm just coming in from the outside edge towards the inside, turning the paper round. Again, experiment with whether you want to come towards you or whether you want to do it away from you. I tend to do a little bit of both. And then what I would do is I'd take a slightly smaller ball tool, let that have a rest for a minute, and then I'd go over that again to make it just a little whiter on the tips. We've got lots of videos, I think, on embossing. So I'm just going to now emboss that outside tulip part here, trumpet part, and a few little dots in the middle. And you can see there we've got the beginnings of the daffodil. What you can do after that is take a rubber and just gently rub out that white pencil that you've done initially. So there we are, we've got the daffodil embossed, and I'll turn it over so you can see the right side of it, and you can see the shading I've got there, which is done, as I say, with the flicking. Now then, the other thing, this is a very traditional way of doing the parchment craft by using the pattern underneath and tracing. But okay, so I've got some other things here. I've got one by Groovy. This is a template, and that's a pattern there you can use. And then there's the other company that produced these templates is Parchcraft Australia, actually manufactured in the UK now. Now, where these differ is they actually have got a groove etched into them. So it means that you can pop your pattern down, your template down, put your parchment on top. It's usually a good idea to stick it down. I use Scotch magic tape, or you could use masking tape, something like that. Stick it down, and the same principle applies really, a little bit of the tumble dry sheet over the top, and then with whichever tool seems to fit in best, you press your parchment into that groove. So this is a great way if you are perhaps a little bit shaky over tracing, but this is more of a modern way. What you can do if you wanted to go a little bit more traditional again is rather than press into there so heavily, just press very, very, very gently, or you could even use your white pencil, and then you can emboss or colour if you want to do it that way. So I'll just take that away. And just to be fair, this one here is the Parchcraft Australia one, and this is the same sort of thing. So we've got some words on here, which is great. Well, we've got Merry Christmas. Let's do that. Now, when you're doing something like Merry Christmas or words, make sure that you've got it upside down. Well, actually, because of the grooves in there, you won't be able to do it any other way other than upside down. But you need to make sure you think about which way round you're going to be doing this. And perfect, because you can then write your messages. So these are great, these embossing templates. You can use bits of them. You don't have to use the whole thing. They're good for words, good for borders, all that sort of thing. But then, of course, there are the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of traditional patterns that you can buy, which give you pictures to trace. They give you instructions, and you can use those as well. So it's good to use a little bit of all sorts, really. Let me just take that one away from there. Turn it up the right way so you can see it. And there's the Merry Christmas, and there is that little leaf. Now you can see where I did it quite lightly there, because then if you wanted to, you could take your ball tool and, a bit like I did the daffodil just now, you can just emboss that from the tip inwards, and it becomes a little bit more shaded. You can do the same with the one here, the ones you've already embossed, but that gives you a harder outline, so it's not quite the same effect. Okay, well, that's part one. There's so much more to parchment craft, obviously, that you can do. So I'm hoping that you've enjoyed this and it's been quite informative for you. So basically, you need your parchment paper. You need something to emboss on. Don't forget your embossing pad. You can use a piece of that foam. You need either a white pencil to draw yourself, or a pattern you can trace from, and you need your embossing tools. So that's it, just to start with. And again, once you've done a picture, you could just cut it out straight, mount it up, and have a great time. So just to give you a couple of examples of work I've done earlier, this is, again, you can see the embossing here, and this is the next stage where you're going to be doing some cutting and making some lace around the edge. And then I've coloured here with some coloured pencils on the front. And then another one here. This one is more traditional white work and a little bit of colour with some pencil on the back of the parchment, and then a nice lace edge. but that's another time. Thanks for watching.